You're listening to PROX.
You played a big role in Proximity launching in terms of you sitting down with me and Zinzi, kind of making us do this.
I had a vision and an idea. I could clearly see from the first time, that very first meeting that we had in our office, I remember telling other people this, and I still do, that I believed that you were going to be one of the most important storytellers and filmmakers of our generation. And this was before you made Fruitvale Station. And this is definitely before you made Creed. And I remember thinking I should have bought stock in Disney when that day you called me and you said, I'm thinking about making Black Panther.
You're listening to In Proximity. Charles D. King is the founder and CEO of Macro, a multi-platform media company representing the voice and perspectives of Black people, indigenous people, and people of color. The company includes a film and TV studio, talent and content creator representation divisions, a branding and creative agency, and an affiliated venture firm. Some of the projects they've co-financed include Mudbound, Fences, Just Mercy, Sorry to Bother You, Raising Dion, Hentified, and Judas and the Black Messiah, produced with Proximity Media and Warner Brothers. But before all this, Charles was a partner and senior agent at William Morris Endeavor. He was the first Black partner in the company's 100-plus year history and the first ever Black partner at any major talent agency. In 2021, when Judas and the Black Messiah was nominated for Best Picture, Charles became part of the first ever all-Black team of producers nominated for an Academy Award alongside director Shaka King and Proximity founder Ryan Coogler. The team worked closely with an esteemed group of Black creatives, activists, and executives, including Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. and Niija Kuykendall, a film executive currently at Netflix, but at the time served as Senior Vice President of Production at Warner Brothers. Charles and Ryan talk about the making of Judas and the Black Messiah and how they first met just as they were laying the foundations for Macro and Proximity.
Hello, this is Charles D. King. I'm the founder and CEO of Macro.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ryan Coogler. I'm a writer, director, producer, and one of the founders of Proximity Media. And just jumping right in, Charles, we've known each other for a little over 10 years, I want to say. And when I first met you, I was in your office, very nice office in Beverly Hills at WME, and you were a talent and lit agent. And we talked, and I was trying to figure out whether or not to sign with WME as a representative agency. I'd already met with Craig Castell at Sundance, and he sent me to go meet with you so I could make my decision. You was kind of like a closer that way. Do you remember that day?
I remember it like it was yesterday, Ryan. And I remember literally you sitting on a couch, that white leather couch in my office. I remember when Craig told me about you in our staff meeting, and he told me about Fruitvale Station. And I remember we met, it must have been at least a 2-hour meeting. And it was one of the most powerful conversations I've had since I've been in the industry.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it was like a kind of brotherhood connection that happened in that room that was very refreshing and unique. And I absolutely remember that day. That meeting was one of the more seminal moments. It was the first time I shared certain aspects of my life and interest outside of just entertainment with anyone in our industry, including my interest around activism and community and some of the experiences that I had had as a young Black man growing up. And that's where I was so identified with your film, Fruitvale Station, with the script and your vision for what you were looking to do by telling Oscar Grant's story. And then I could tell from that meeting too, what you were looking to do to use your voice as a storyteller to lift community and bring people together and entertain. And I remember when you first pitched the story, this father-son story that would be used and set within the Rocky universe. And I remember you literally pitched Creed to me there because I asked you, what else do you have? And then I said, well, by the way, funny enough, the guy down the hall represent Sylvester Stallone, and we could introduce you. And it was just one of those magical conversations and moments. And so I knew then that you were destined for greatness with your storytelling and how you were going to use your voice.
I remember having a feeling that you weren't going to be an agent for that much longer. And I didn't know that much about the industry, but I was like, man, this dude seems like you felt bigger than the job you had, you know? So I kind of figured it was a matter of time before you transitioned to doing something else. And that something else ended up becoming launching Macro. For folks listening, we got folks listening from all walks of life, you know, like what does an agent do? If you were to like put it in a couple sentences, I know it's difficult, but just to paint a picture for folks, you know what I'm saying, of what you were doing before Macro.
First off, for those that are not in the entertainment industry or those that aspire to be, the talent agency world has been for over 120 years. They're at the epicenter of our industry in terms of the center of the spoke of a wheel, where they're interfacing with all the studios, managers, production companies, publicists, the financiers. They're so connected to the artists, and they're the artist advocates that find the opportunities, the scripts, the material. They help to introduce the artist to the marketplace, negotiate their deals, work in conjunction with their attorneys and their managers to forge their careers and to build their businesses. And so I was very blessed to be the first Black partner in the history of Hollywood at any one of the major talent agencies, and spent over 17 years at the William Morris and William Morris Endeavor in the agency world. And so that was my career path. And I did that for many years and loved doing it before launching Macro.
I'm just realizing before getting into Macro, like, just give us a snapshot of like what your career was like as an agent. You know, who are some of the folks that you represented during your tenure at both William Morris and at WME?
Yeah, I was very fortunate and blessed to represent and work with some of the most talented and inspiring artists, multi-hyphenates, filmmakers, musicians, and moguls in our industry. I was blessed to work with filmmakers like Tim Story, put him in the barbershop. Made that deal for him my first year as an agent, to filmmakers like Lee Daniels or M. Night Shyamalan, and musician multi-hyphenates like Andre Benjamin, Prince and Janet Jackson, Tyrese, and many others, and actors like Michael Ealy or Terrence Howard and many others.
You leaving a big one off. You worked with Oprah for a little bit too, right?
Blessed to also work with Oprah and her company as she was really building out Harpo and using her voice as a producer. And so I was really the point person for her film business while I was there too, during my last couple of years at the agency.
And what's like your basic 9 to 5 as an agent? I know it can vary, but to paint a picture for folks, what's a day as an agent?
First off, there's no such thing as a 9 to 5 in the world of a talent agent. Okay. It's more like 6 in the morning to midnight or 1 in the morning. Like it and sometimes around the clock. Your world between work and personal life almost blurs together, because so much of our industry is also not only reading material and being on phone calls, in meetings, visiting sets, being on sets, but it's also the cultivation and building of relationships and socializing and being at functions and screenings and watching and reading material. And then there's a 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock dinner with 2 colleagues, or there's a premiere and you go to the premiere and there's the after party. And then after that, you go home and you read the script at night. Yeah, so that's average day.
Man,
every day is different.
That sounds both exhilarating and exhausting. But and it was 17 years of that.
Absolutely. And every day is different. When we met, I already had my business plan written, and I was in a phase of my career where I was really looking to support other colleagues like our friend, your agent, Craig Castell, and mentor and be supportive of their growth, as well as helping them and working with other amazing filmmakers and artists from within the walls of the talent agency world, but ultimately knew that there was an opportunity for me to do something far greater for the community in launching and building a media company like the one that we launched 8 years ago at Macro.
you're a partner now at this point, it sounds like, with massive clients at a massive agency, and you got to let folks know I'm transitioning to start something new. Take me to that point. Like, when did you know it was time?
Wow. I'll tell you, while at Howard Law, when I graduated, in my commemoration book, where they asked every graduate, what is your plan? What will you be doing in 10 years? In that commemoration book, I said, in 10 years, I'm going to be at the helm of a diversified entertainment and media company.
Wow.
So I graduated from Howard Law in 96. I moved to LA a year later, landed in the William Morris mailroom. So say 10 years after that, it was 2006. I was a very successful agent with a, multi-million-dollar business practice. I was doing well. I had gone from mailroom to being a multimillionaire. And I was still antsy because I knew there was something bigger for me. And it wasn't until 2009 when William Morris merged with Endeavor. And there was so much chaos that went on through the year of the merger. And I had cultivated and had such a great hockey stick trajectory. It was the first time in my career that I lost a couple of clients. There was just a lot of upheaval and things that happened. And I spent a year playing defense, trying to just make sure I didn't get picked apart and adjusting to the new company that had now merged. And I think it was on Christmas Day of that year when I was still putting out a fire of some issues as a result of this merger. I knew for then that I was not going to continue being in that type of position again. And so then it became, how am I going to transition? And then it was this following years when I started writing the business plan for what has now become Macro. And it wasn't until a few years after that I had the conversations internally with the parties that ran WME to let them know, hey, look, I'm going to one day go launch and build a company like the one we're building now. And I told them about it and shared the information and said, I'm going to do it. And so once, I said, look, I'd like you guys blessed and I'm going to go and do this. And the rest was history. I remember that day like it was yesterday as well. But the light bulb of like, I'm absolutely going to leave. There's a bigger play for me. I'm going to leave and I'm going to launch a company like Macro was Christmas Day of 2009.
Christmas Day of 2009.
That's right.
And it was that vulnerability juxtaposed with your family.
Yeah, well, there were several things. There was recognizing that there was a more empowered position for me to use my experience and my skills to uplift culture and to make a difference and to build a company that I knew would inspire and transcend and make an impact in our industry. And it was also making sure that I personally and my family would never be in a position to be subjected to some of the experiences that I was having through that year of the merger, where there were things that were outside of my personal control. And I recognized that I would never want to put myself or my family in that position again, and that there was a more impactful and empowered way for me to live my life, and also for me to live and build in a way that would also help others and could change the paradigm. And it's really been a blessing to see a lot of that shift take place once I took that leap of faith, because I knew that there was a need to show other people that what I'm doing and building with Macro, that it's possible. Because what I experienced through that year was there were not enough of us, whether you were a young filmmaker, whether you were someone sitting in Decatur, Georgia, or whether you were a very successful artist or mogul, there weren't enough of them that recognized the power that we have. And I recognized that I needed to be able to do it for myself and my family, but also a larger community to show what was possible.
Man, that's amazing, man. And did you feel like your time, 17 years in the center of the spoke, that is the wheel of the entertainment industry, did you feel like that was valuable? Like that was a great time spent? Do you feel like you still use the skills that you built over that time today?
It's not possible to duplicate those 17 years of the experience, putting out 100 fires a day, all of the relationships, the thousands of relationships, my natural connectivity with so many people, with so many artists, with so many executives and producers and people that I came up with in the industry, the amount of scripts that I read, the number of movies, the events, just the thousands of phone calls, the negotiation of deals, the trends and patterns of business, the experience was invaluable. So uniquely positioned me to do what I'm doing now. And having an African American who up to that point, there'd never been someone from our community to be at the highest levels of this world, which is a world that has now opened up slightly since that time that I was in there. But I was in uncharted territory during my time in the agency world. So yes, that 17 years of experience was incredibly valuable.
And I hear you talking about business plan. And just out of curiosity, like, it's gonna sound ridiculous maybe, but I'm just thinking about folks who are listening. Like what is a business plan? What kind of things should a business plan have in it? Like, what were you working on? Because I remember you were talking about working on it for a long time.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, for anyone listening, whether you're a young person or an older person, there's real power in taking your ideas and your thoughts and your visions and writing them down on paper. And your goals. There've been so many books and studies that have shown how successful people in almost every industry are people that write their goals down, that write their thoughts down, and jot and tinker with things. And so part of the business plan writing process for me is really taking this vision and these ideas that were in my head and formalizing them, dumping them into one place, and then working with really smart people. I had some really smart people that I work with who I had NDA'd up, who had gone to Harvard Business School to help put the ideas and the vision that I had on paper and then add some structure to it, put statistics alongside of, put numbers in it. And it really began to shape the plan and idea. And many of them some of those plans were things that I didn't even understand exactly some of them. They were just ideas and a vision that I had. And so ultimately, yeah, it turned into like a 100-page deck.
100 pages.
Yeah, the first business plan for the, multi-platform media company was originally 100 pages. And then I wrote a complementary business plan on a complementary investment strategy that would sit alongside the media company. And this is something that I worked on weekends and the evenings throughout the course of over a year or two, post the William Morris Endeavor merger. And I've noticed too with Ryan and many of our interactions and conversations with one of the beautiful things about you is I've remember how many meetings and things we've been a part of where there'll be a term that'll be brought up in a meeting and you'll say, "Can you tell me what that is?" Or
Yeah.
"Can you explain?" And that's what's one of the many things that makes you so unique and special. Because most people in our industry pretend like they know these things and act like they know terms. And you're willing to be like, "Can you tell me what that is?" And so I wasn't maybe not as enlightened as you are. So sometimes I would hear things on calls or be in meetings and then I'd write it down and I'd go back and look it up. So when I started writing a business plan for Macro, I didn't know the difference between mezzanine financing, credit, debt, venture capital, private equity. I had no idea about the difference between each of these.
I'm gonna stop you right now because if I hear mezzanine, I start thinking about seats at a concert. So what is a mezzanine strategy, bro?
Mezzanine financing it's almost like a form of credit. It's not like pure equity, and it's not like a loan or debt. It's almost somewhere in between. That's why they call it mezzanine.
Okay, like literally like a concert or were you in between the floors? Okay. Man, learn something new every
I just had
conversation
to learn,
with you. Yeah.
I had to learn a lot of these terms, and then I spent time actually just getting to know people in the space while also writing the business plan and well in advance of launching the company. So it was to establish these relationships to understand from getting to know people in the arena, so that once I actually launched the company, I could draw upon these relationships, and they weren't people that I was just getting to know once I was out on the playing field.
Amazing. When you made that first move, when you left WME, let everybody know what you were doing, announcement comes out. How many employees did Macro have?
4 full-time employees, and then my wife, Stacy, because the King Family Fund financed Macro the first 6 months. And so Stacy was consulting and very involved in the company for the first 3 years, even though she wasn't full-time until 4 years ago.
Big love to Stacy. So how many employees do y'all have now? It's been 8 years?
It's been 8 years. So we're about at 50 people now and continuing to grow organically. That includes M.08. M.08 is the joint venture representation firm that we launched just under 3 years ago that represents a lot of incredible artists and multi-hyphenates and filmmakers and writers, as well as Uncommon, which is a digital influencer representation group that's a sister company to M.08.
And what's that like, going from 4 employees in Stacy to 50 people in Macro and 2 partner companies?
It's been a beautiful journey. Yes, it's been beautiful to watch the company unfold, but I'd say even more powerful to see the community that's been cultivated, to see other companies that have launched post-Macro and have taken an entrepreneurial approach to how they're building their businesses, the artists' careers that have been launched and that have flourished as a result of the company's launch and what we've been building. Not only just the artists, but I'd also say the executive talent and the we've had almost 200 interns that have come through Macro. And
Wow.
We've had so many talent that are now all throughout the industry. And that impact that I knew, that I envisioned that Macro would have, it's just been beautiful to see that come to fruition. And I still look at it like we're just getting started.
Incredible. And I'm just bringing us up to date. You left WME, and I think I was like twisting your arm to stay as my manager, which I was able to work out. And when y'all formalized the representation side of y'all business, we was able to make it more official. But I feel very secure doing business in the world, knowing that Charles King is still on my team. Along with Craig and Jonathan and Mark and other folks. But you played a big role in Proximity launching, in terms of you sitting down with me and Zinzi, kind of making us do this.
I had a vision and an idea. I could clearly see from the first time, that very first meeting that we had in our office, I remember telling other people this, and I still do, that I believed that you were going to be one of the most important storytellers and filmmakers of our generation. And this was before you made Fruitvale Station. And this is definitely before you made Creed. And I remember thinking I should have bought stock in Disney when that day you called me and you said, I'm thinking about making Black Panther. But the only thing I would say is this: that's different people have superpowers. One power of mine is I have the ability to identify talent in others, and also to try to do what I can to nurture and advise, and just, make sure that it's what the beauty of what's there comes to fruition. And so it was all there. It's always been there. I knew also too that what you and Zinzi and Sev were setting out to do, and the type of company that you're building, that who you are as people, the opportunity it's going to provide, is just far greater than what you yourselves were looking to do. And unfortunately, that is unique in the industry that I came up in. But what's beautiful about where we are now is that there are more like-minded people like yourselves that are less beaten by an older system and are more uplifting of others and recognizing that we can all rise together. And I saw that in you when we first met.
All right, so we start Proximity, and we get the opportunity to work together like immediately. You know, our friend Shaka King, who we worked with, Black Off of Human Rights, and filmmaker who I met at the Sundance Film Festival in 2013, had a film there called Newlyweds, a comedy set in Brooklyn. Spent some time with him, really dug him when we were doing some work around state-sponsored human rights violations. Black Out for Human Rights is a collective of like-minded folks across different industries and walks of life, but predominantly folks that work in entertainment and folks that work in human rights activism. And we were formed to combat and raise awareness of state-sponsored human rights violations that happen in globally, but specifically in the United States. Loop Shaka in, we got to, Shaka got to know Charles, and Zinzi and Shaka and I had a close friendship. So I remember, working on Panther. I'm in New York because they're doing a screening of Creed with the orchestra in Brooklyn. So whenever we in New York, Zinzi and I try to stop by Shaka's house, see his parents, and he tells us this idea, that would become Judas and the Black Messiah. At that point, it was calling it Jesus Was My Homeboy, and
Yes.
And I remember thinking, like, we didn't, Zinzi and I didn't have a company, but I remember thinking, man, I would love to help Shaka make this. And Zinzi and I would talk about it, eventually Black Panther comes out. We're starting to figure out Proximity. Shaka calls and says, hey, man, I want you guys to be involved. I'm gonna send you the script. He sends me the script. I read it. Zinzi reads it. I immediately send it to Charles. And I'm like, hey, man, we should, read this. If you like it, we should figure out a way to do this together. And what was so great about what you started with Macro was that you guys had the ability to finance. Because it was a movie that we knew would be challenging on the surface for studios and for the marketplace. But I just remember thinking, like, man, how crazy is this that Charles, man, my Charles, you know what I'm saying, has this company. we can if he's interested in doing this, we can walk into any studio and say, hey, this is what we thinking, and we have money, like we coming in with financing, and that's what we did. Man, it was that part of it was just, I gotta be honest with you, that part of it, we never really talked about this, but walking into those meetings, man, I felt like I was like walking in like 10 feet tall. You know what I'm saying?
I couldn't agree more. I remember the phone call when you called me. It was about 3 weeks after the global success of Black Panther. You were on vacation somewhere, I believe. And I was leaving the CAA Oscars party. It was the Friday night before the Oscars. And I'm leaving. It must have been midnight. And you called. I'm like, hello? What's going on, Ryan? And you said, you got a second? I said, yeah. And you said, look, I know what I want to do with the next year. And I said, what is that? It's like, I'm going to build my company. I'm going to build my company. I want to utilize the uniqueness of the position that I am. So here it is. You have this global success. You could have done anything in the world. And you said, I'm now going to launch this company and utilize this power that I have in this moment to launch a company and open up opportunities for others. And then you said, there's a project I think I want to be the first one. And then you said, I'd like to see if you and Macro would be interested in partnering on it. And I was like, absolutely. And I remember you sent me the script. And the next day, I think I was at the Spirit Awards. And you were already hitting me up like a great producer. Less than 12 hours later saying, have you read it yet? And I remember reading it that night and that weekend and being blown away by it and already being a huge fan of Shaka's from the work we did together with Black Off for Human Rights and the journey that we went on. It was just so beautiful and powerful. But the power of you also recognizing what it's like for us to come together and for Shaka to recognize that. And I think the power of the three of us going in together, you said you felt like you were 10 feet tall. So did I, because that was like showed unity and power together. And I believe that was part of the beauty of the experience and why the film it was as good as it is. I believe that Judas is going to stand the test of time, and I'm so incredibly proud of the work we did together on it. And I feel like I know our company got better from the process, the experience of developing that project with Proximity. And I think we all learned from one another. And it made a great film that I think has really just the impact that it's had. It's just been beautiful, just a beautiful experience.
Yeah, man, it was an amazing experience. I remember just so many crazy stories from like me, you, Zenz, and Shaka, going to see Chairman Fred Jr. for the first time. Like
oh
in,
my
in,
goodness,
in
yes.
Maywood. And I remember, man, I can't go for to tell this story, man. But I remember the first day we were going to see him, and I think Rosa Clemente she was with Chairman. Rosa Clemente is a Puerto Rican American activist, teacher, academic, politician, who was a friend of Shaka's, and is a friend of Chairman Fred Hampton Jr., who helped us to make the connection initially when we were looking for a way to sit down with Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. And we went to the Hampton House, and Chairman and Rosa weren't there yet. And I remember I remember the sun was going down in Maywood.
It sure was.
And the Uber had let us out. And I remember me and Zenz was looking at each other. I think Shaka was kind of in his phone trying to find where Rosa was. And me and Zenz looked at each other, and we were looking around. People were coming out. You know what I'm saying? They were looking at us like, who are y'all? You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I remember, Charles, you had this big old backpack on that looked like it had like 4 or 5 laptops in it, an iPad. You was dressed.
Carry it.
You was dressed real nice. You know what I'm saying? Like you always are. And I remember me and Zenz just thinking like, yeah. I remember me and Zenz just thinking, yo, we got to get to like a coffee shop or somewhere. We got to just get somewhere where we could just sit for a sec and not just be outside in front of people's houses. You know what I'm saying? And,
yes.
And I remember at this time, the craziest part about it was the closest place that made sense was Starbucks. But this was right after the dudes had got arrested at Starbucks.
Yes.
Just for sitting there. So we was debating over whether or not the 4 of us should even like be seen walking into a Starbucks at that
time. By the way, and that was when we had to like get to a corner.
Yeah.
We had to get to a corner where we ducked into it was a restaurant, but it was like behind a bulletproof.
It was like a chicken joint that had the bulletproof glass, but nobody was in there. Remember, like we went in and we like, hey, yo, excuse me. And nobody came out.
That's right. We were like trying to get an Uber to come. And then we were going to have an Uber take us to Starbucks. And they were like, oh, but can we go there?
Yeah.
And then Chairman finally.
Yeah, Chairman pulled up. And we went in the house and met with him for the first time. And I just remember thinking like, yo, this is going to be a crazy movie. It never stopped being that.
It sure didn't.
Was this before we partnered with WB and Niija and stuff?
I believe so. This was before we even got. We were just trying to get them,
the family's blessing,
get their blessing before we even took the project out into the market.
Holy Toledo, man! What a time!
That sure was. And then the several trips back and forth and spending time with Chairman Fred and Mother Akua and their comrades.
Yes,
in the room. Some on phones, the vetting process. It was really.
I mean, it was an incredible experience, man. Like looking back, I wouldn't change anything for the world. But man, going through it was intense. Yeah,
there's a reason why everyone that worked so closely on this movie, we're all bonded for life. There were just the experience of how the film came together. And the respect and the bonds that were forged, it was for me, it was transformative.
I remember I remember walking in there that first day and seeing Chairman Fred Jr. And like, first and foremost, he's a mountain of a man. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's the thing that was such a trip, was looking at pictures of Chairman Fred Sr. You know, you don't ever think about like how big or small he was. These historical figures, you know what I mean? Like, and that's one of the things that we robbed of when these folks are assassinated. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just them in a physical sense. You know, they become pictures for everybody who's born after their time. And I just remember the size of him. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And then thinking about his father, like you know, and you realize his father was a big man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
he walks in, he fills the room.
Fills the room up.
He fills the room.
Like physically and through his persona, you know?
Yes.
And he's super sharp. You know, you realize that he's studying. Like you know, when he's not talking, he's studying. And this was like this was a real meeting, man. It was confrontational.
Yes.
You know?
Absolutely.
He was very much like saying, like, you know, how did y'all get this far without coming to see me? And I remember at one point he pounded the table, not because he was upset, but he was like getting his point across. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yes.
And the whole time we there, he feels familiar to me. You know, like,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking this because like, you know, he looks like his father. You know what I'm saying? I seen pictures, but then at one point, man, he's talking and he's getting worked up, and it hits me that we had met before. You know, like we
Yes.
that we had met at the Berkeley Flea Market, and he had handed me a informational pamphlet about the Black Panther Party Cubs. You know,
and he remembered you.
Yo, we remembered it at the same time. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, yo, and it was one of them things where we had been looking at each other the whole time the same way. Like, man, where do I know you from? You know what I mean? Like, and it was the strangest thing, but also I had so much more respect for him, because when I met him, he wasn't there saying, hey, yo, I'm Chairman Fred Hampton's son. I'm not, I'm this, I'm that. He was just there working, man. Like, handing out pamphlets.
He's doing the work.
Doing the work, man.
Yes.
And I think he was by himself. You know, like when I met him, he wasn't alone in Maywood, but he might have had security detail that was like around and I didn't see. You know what I'm saying, at the time. But man, it blew my mind in a way. But also it gave me hope. Like internally, that's like, yo, we gotta get this done. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like the project felt ordained in a way. You know what I'm saying?
It sure did. And I remember just how he lit up when he realized that you guys had met. And I saw, not that he was guarded, but I know that they were really assessing us and trying to understand who we were.
Yeah.
And then I saw like the light come into his eyes, and it was like an immediate brotherhood bond that was formed with the two of you. It was just, and it was interesting. We watched this unfold and our conversation, and it was just clear in there just how much mutual respect and admiration was there. And I saw Shaka realize it. I realized it. Zenzi did. And just, it was from then on, it was like that unique bond that you and Chairman Fred had that would help bridge the gap of when we had issues or when we were looking to get their support. And I feel like that was kismet, and that was meant to be. That was, it's almost like you couldn't even come up with the circumstances around that.
None of them, man. Even down to our executive, Niija and Shaka, they knew each other in college.
Yeah.
You know, they knew each other in college, man. Like, and it wasn't like they went to school together. It was through happenstance that they knew each other. I think through their roommates. You know what I'm saying? But like, knew each other well enough that when we walked into Warner Brothers, you know, Shaka and Niija had that connection. You know what I mean? And so when you look at it, this was a project that had a lot of connections in the Black community.
Yeah.
Black community of entertainers, Black community of activism, that even when that project seemed like impossible, you know what I mean? And there was a lot of moments, man, where we hit challenges, you know, like the pandemic and, you know, having to release the film through HBO Max, the uncertainty. It was always like this feeling that I had, like, yo, I think this is going to work out. Prox Recs. So Prox Recs, This is the segment where we recommend a book or a piece of advice or a movie to listeners at home, and just keeping it on topic. My Prox Rec is going to be the book, The Mailroom. Since we talked a bunch about Charles' time as an agent, this is a very famous book in our industry that talks a little bit about the business from the agency side perspective. It's known to be a little salacious, but I don't know, Charles, how you feel about that book in terms of somebody reading about what the agent life is like?
I think that's a great recommendation for anyone that wants to work in the entertainment industry. Talent agencies play a big part of it, and you need to understand the history of how the agencies have evolved and what takes place within them. So that's absolutely a great suggestion for young folks that want to know more about that industry. And then, do I get to recommend one as well?
Oh, of course.
There's a book called Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? And it's a story about Reginald Lewis. And it was a book that I read when I was in law school, thinking about what I would ultimately do with my career. And it's about the first African-American Wall Street titan who built a multi-billion-dollar company. And it tells his journey. And it was really inspiring and quite compelling. So I would recommend that to any young person looking to forge a path in the business industry.
Charles, thank you for making time. And I know you got a lot going on. It's apparent to the audience just how much you got going on just by, talking a little bit about what you do. But I think that our time together was fruitful. I got new insight and things that are going on with you and your life, and obviously a profound gratitude for our relationship in general. But thank you for coming through and being a part of In Proximity.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for letting me join you on this podcast and for everything that you, Zenzi, and Sev are building with Proximity. And it was my honor to be here.
Amazing. Amazing. Charles, I love you, bro. Thank you for this, man.
Love you too, Coog.
In Proximity is a production of Proximity Media. If you like the show, be sure to follow, rate, and review it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app, and tell your friends and loved ones to do the same. Seriously, you can do that right now. Send a link to someone who you think might really like this conversation. Learn more and read transcripts of this episode and others at proximitymedia.com. Don't forget to follow at Proximity Media on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. The show is produced by me, Paula Mardo. Executive producers are Ryan Coogler, Zinzi Kuygler, Sev Ohanian, and me. Our theme song and additional music is composed by Ludwig Göransson. Ken Nana is our sound designer and mix engineer. Paulina Cherazova is our production assistant. She's also our audio editor for this episode. Special thanks to the whole Proximity Media team and to you for listening to In Proximity. Meet you back here next week.
Oh, is it time?
I'll make the extra time if we need it.
I actually got a heart out, Charles.
Great. Okay, so it's on you then.
Yeah.
Because you're building a company, you busy.
Nah.
Yes.